century, this man spoke of strength, of courage and honor, and the entire nation was caught up by his spirit.
The principles for which we stand are the principles of fair play and a square deal for every man and every woman in the United States. I wish to see you boys join the party and act in that party in the same way I'd expect any one of you to act in a football game. In other words, don't flinch, don't foul, and hit the line hard.
He carried a big stick, but he seldom spoke softly. His name, Theodore Roosevelt, and this is his biography. Wallace, this is Biography. Our story, Theodore Roosevelt. Teddy Roosevelt was a dynamic leader. He was the colonel who led the charge up San Juan Hill in the Spanish-American War. He was the president they called the Trust Buster. He was the statesman who told his country to speak softly and carry a big stick. The night he died, a close friend remarked, death had to catch him asleep, for if Roosevelt had been awake, there would have been a fight. That's the kind of man he was. Theodore Roosevelt, the 26th President of the United States. He was a man of boundless energy, of deep conviction. And his personal magnetism was such that a rival politician complained, when he is in the neighborhood, the public can no more turn away than a small boy can turn from a circus parade. To the American people, he was a symbol of strength and vitality. Yet Theodore Roosevelt began life as a weak and sickly child. New York City, 1863. This handsome townhouse is virtually a prison to 5-year-old Teddy Roosevelt. Crippled by asthma, he wistfully admires healthy children, the free, the active, and most of all, the strong. Young Teddy is thrilled by stories of the Civil War raging in the South. To be a soldier, he thinks, is to be a real man. Teddy's mother, a gentle, cultivated woman, adores her delicate son. But Theodore Roosevelt Sr., a prominent lawyer, is determined that his son will not be coddled. You must make your body, he tells Teddy. It is hard drudgery, but I know you will do it. By the time he enters Harvard University to study law, he is a vigorous young man. He has come to love sports and the rugged outdoor life. By Jove, he writes, I enjoy every moment I live. And he especially enjoys the company of Alice Lee, a beautiful Boston debutante. A few months after Teddy's graduation from Harvard, he and Alice are married. And the young couple's future does seem assured. They have social position, and a trust fund brings Teddy a regular income. But 1 year later, he shocks his aristocratic friends and relatives by taking up an ungentlemanly career. Teddy becomes a politician. He is elected as a Republican to the New York State Legislature and astonishes his colleagues by attacking the ruling political machine, Tammany Hall. But then Teddy's mother dies of typhoid fever. And only 4 hours later, his wife dies in childbirth. Teddy seeks escape. He buys a ranch in North Dakota and throws himself into the hard life of a cowhand. Here he goes out of his way to court discomfort and danger. And in time, he realizes a boyhood dream. He becomes a hardened adventurer. He returns east and marries again in 1886. His bride is Edith Carroll, a friend since childhood. resuming his career in politics, he receives a Washington appointment as Civil Service Commissioner in Washington, D.C. His startling aggressiveness in this minor position makes him the talk of Washington. After a few years, Teddy moves to another job that calls for a crusader. As police commissioner of New York City, he enthusiastically fights corruption, but he's impatient and he wants an even bigger challenge. In 1897, he wins a post as Assistant Secretary of the Navy in President McKinley's new administration. Then, February 15, 1898, the battleship Maine blows up in Havana Harbor, and a wave of indignation against Spain sweeps the nation. McKinley declares war. Teddy seizes the opportunity to become a soldier. He organizes a volunteer regiment, bringing together cowhands and gamblers from the west and polo-playing Harvard boys from the east. They call themselves Roosevelt's Rough Riders. They are amateur soldiers, but their enthusiasm runs high. And newly commissioned Lieutenant Colonel Theodore Roosevelt is the most enthusiastic of all. Teddy slashes through red tape to get his men to Cuba. He's afraid that the war will end before he can see action. Finally, on July 1st, 1898, Teddy gets his chance. At the head of his troops, he leads a charge up San Juan Hill. I waved my hat, he recalled, and up the hill we went. Rough Riders emerge as the most colorful heroes of the war. His fame and popularity catapult him into a race for governor of New York. Teddy, the Rough Rider, is presented to the voters as the man who can clean up the scandal-ridden State House. After a hard campaign, he is elected. He is 42, but still almost boyishly vigorous. Teddy loves his role as head of a bustling, energetic family. He's a wonderful father, warm-hearted and full of fun. He boasts, "I have the happiest home life of any man I have ever known." Here, he can momentarily forget the intrigues of fellow Republicans who are already looking for a way to ease him out of office. For them, he is too much of a rebel. Party bosses make their move at the Republican convention in 1900. They nominate Teddy for an impressive but traditionally powerless position. Against his will, Teddy runs for vice president on the McKinley ticket. The Republicans easily win the election, and Teddy is put away on the back shelf of the vice presidency. But one of Teddy's most bitter opponents, political boss Mark Hanna, is worried. Now, he complains, there is only one light between this madman and the White House. 1901. On September 6th, President McKinley attends the Pan American Exposition in Buffalo. An assassin strikes. A week later, President William McKinley is dead. Theodore Roosevelt, the man who was made vice president to thwart his political career, now takes over the nation's highest office. At first, Teddy is dazed by his new position. He pledges to go slow and continue McKinley's conservative policies. Some newspapers hail Teddy's apparent change of heart. He is an entirely different man today, one reports hopefully. Then in May of 1902, 147,000 miners strike in eastern Pennsylvania. The mine operators refuse even to negotiate with the workers. They are out to break the union. The strike drags on for 6 months. With winter coming on, schools and hospitals are without heat. The coal shortage creates a national emergency. Teddy forgets his promise of moderation. He shocks the conservatives by threatening to send the army in to operate the mines. And the strike is settled. It is the first time time a president has personally interfered to break a deadlock between capital and labor. 1904, an election year and a time of crisis for Teddy Roosevelt. To be re-elected, Teddy must go directly to the people. Teddy makes sure that his message reaches every interested voter. He tours the country, making an exhausting schedule of speeches. The prestige of the United States is a major issue. Americans are proud of their growing strength, but Teddy warns them that the nation is still considered a minor world power. We are a great people, he says, and we must play a great part in the world. All we can decide is whether we shall play it well or ill. But on the eve of election, Teddy feels that he has failed to win popular support. He fears that the public may not be ready for his bold policies. The huge crowds which have turned out to hear his fighting speeches seem more curious than inspired. And Teddy Roosevelt is convinced that the American people will consign him to political oblivion. Washington, D.C., 1905. A large and enthusiastic crowd gathers to cheer Teddy Roosevelt. He has been returned to office by a landslide vote. I had no conception that such a thing was possible, he says. At last, I am no longer a political accident. Full of assurance, Roosevelt throws the nation into the arena of international politics. Teddy boldly offers himself as a mediator in the Russo-Japanese War. Responding to his invitation, diplomats from both countries meet at Portsmouth, New Hampshire in August of 1905. And at this conference, arranged by Roosevelt, they quickly reach agreement. His new administration has its first resounding triumph on the international scene. Now, Teddy decides on a bold move to demonstrate the United States military capability. He orders 16 American warships to circle the globe on what he calls a goodwill cruise. The Great White Fleet visits various major foreign ports and leaves a lasting impression of America's power to dominate the high seas. But the United States has only one fleet and two great coastlines to defend. To ensure the safety of his country, Teddy is determined to realize a dream which has fascinated engineers for centuries. To link the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans by a canal across the narrow Isthmus of Panama. In the 1880s, a French company had attempted the project, but disease and engineering difficulties brought bankruptcy and total failure. The United States government is now ready to try where the French had failed. But the Latin American nation of Colombia, which controls Panama, will not agree to sell the needed land at a price Teddy Roosevelt considers reasonable. Suddenly, a revolution erupts in Panama City. As the fighting rages, American warships appear off the coast of Panama, and they leave only after the Colombian government has been overthrown. Within 10 days, Teddy has purchased from the new Colombian government a 6-mile wide strip of land, bridging the Isthmus of Panama. But finally, success. The mariner's map of the world is drastically altered. New York is brought 8,000 sea miles closer to San Francisco. The Panama Canal is hailed as a monument to American technical genius and to the determination of Teddy Roosevelt. In Washington, Teddy continues to carry on his unrelenting battle against the trusts. Monopolies in railroads, steel, sugar, and other basic industries have gained colossal economic power, and they are all but free of regulation. Instead, they often control the government. The United States Senate is even called the Millionaires Club. Teddy's attack on the trusts is direct and powerful. His big stick policy is a combination of public outrage, court rulings, and the president's withering scorn. Court battles drag on for years, but never again will the presidency be subject to the will of the tycoons. At the end of his term in office, Teddy feels bound to honor a long-standing pledge not to run again. He is begged to accept the nomination, but he firmly refuses. Instead, Teddy handpicks his successor, William Howard Taft, who has been Secretary of War in the Roosevelt cabinet. Taft carries the election with ease, but he is considered little more than Teddy Roosevelt's obedient shadow when he takes office. Teddy is determined to leave political worries behind and to relax. So he sails for Africa on an extended safari. For 11 months, Teddy wanders in the wilds, engrossed in nature study and hunting. For long periods, he is content in the African wilderness, facing no diplomatic problem greater than deciding who gets the first shot at a lion. On his way home, Teddy is welcomed in Europe with the dignity and ceremony due the leader of a major nation. To most Europeans, he is still the President of the United States. He is showered with honors. I feel, he says, that if I met another king, I should bite him. In Norway, he accepts the Nobel Peace Prize for his role in ending the Russo-Japanese War. June 10th, 1910, Teddy arrives in New York City. His friends and admirers welcome him home with noisy enthusiasm, but Taft is conspicuously absent. For a time, Teddy rests in seclusion at home at Sagamore Hill. But inevitably, he is drawn back into politics. Taft's enemies come to him from all over the nation. Daily, he hears reports that Taft is becoming a conservative president, but he is not carrying on the Roosevelt tradition. Touring the country, Teddy accuses Taft of being a weak president, of being soft on big business. Soon, it is clear that he and Taft will contend for the nomination in 1912. Taft replies to the challenge. I do not want to fight Teddy Roosevelt, he tells the public, but sometimes a man in a corner fights, and I am going to fight. The 1912 Republican Convention brings the showdown. After a bitter struggle, Taft wins the nomination and the support of conservative Republicans. Teddy walks out, taking the liberal faction with him. In the heat of anger and disappointment, he makes a fateful decision. He will run in the election as an independent. I am as fit as a bull moose, Teddy says early in the campaign, and the bull moose becomes the symbol of his renegade party. Teddy accuses Taft of giving up national sovereignty and of going to any lengths to prevent conflict with other nations. Taft feels he is being accused simply of not being Teddy Roosevelt. And in the end, the only man who benefits by the contest is the Democratic candidate, Woodrow Wilson. The Bull Moose Party is disbanded. Teddy Roosevelt turns back to his private life, tired and embittered by failure. He has always drawn strength from living close to nature, and now he again becomes engrossed in the study of wildlife and conservation. On field trips, he is happy to be left to himself. In 1913, Teddy travels to South America. From Brazilian officials, he hears of an unexplored jungle stream called the River of Doubt. This has the sound of adventure. Despite warnings that this is a venture for younger men, he leads an expedition to chart the desolate territory. Teddy drives himself hard, elated at the prospect of challenging the wilderness once more. Emerges from the jungle exhausted and with a seriously injured leg. I had to go, he sadly explains. It was my last chance to be a boy. 1916, war is raging in Europe. The nation is caught up in a violent controversy. Should the United States aid England or remain neutral as long as possible? President Wilson, re-elected by a slim margin, pleads for the American people to remain impartial. Teddy Roosevelt dives into the controversy. He's convinced that Wilson is making a tragic error. The events soon prove him right. Finally, on April 6, 1917, Wilson has no choice. He signs America's declaration of war. It has come at last. For a year, Teddy has been hammering at American unpreparedness. Now, finally, he can do something. He goes to Wilson and asks for a combat assignment in France. But the president's answer is firm. He will not allow Teddy Roosevelt to fight. Teddy is humiliated and furious. He is convinced that Wilson has turned him down for political reasons. Roosevelt can't stay away from the great adventure for long. He begins his own kind of campaign, a strenuous speaking tour covering the nation in support of the war effort. He is a familiar visitor in the training camps. He loves to spend his time with soldiers, and he's always ready to recall a glorious victory long ago at San Juan Hill. He is deeply proud that his 4 sons are fighting in France. Then, in July 1918, a few months before the end of the war, Teddy's youngest son, Quentin, flies in a sortie over the German lines. His plane does not return, and the next day he is reported killed in action. When the doughboys come home, a pale and shaken Theodore Roosevelt is there to greet them. He composes a moving epitaph for Quentin. Only those are fit to live who do not fear to die. Both life and death, he writes, are part of the same great adventure. Teddy Roosevelt's great adventure is almost over. He spends most of his time at Sagamore Hill. Now the old energy and exuberance are gone. Shortly before the end, he says to his wife, "I wonder if you will ever know how much I love Sagamore Hill." And then, in the early morning of January 6, 1919, Theodore Roosevelt dies in his sleep. Theodore Roosevelt's death brings worldwide expressions of grief. But perhaps his finest epitaph was spoken by a distant relative, Franklin Delano Roosevelt.
We know, and the nation knows, yes, the world knows, that Theodore Roosevelt was a great patriot and a great soul.
Theodore Roosevelt wasn't the kind of man or the kind of politician who played it safe. Time and again, he jeopardized his political career for the sake of his principles, and he often paid dearly for it.